guys, Annie here. Welcome to another video. I'm not actually going to be playing the game. I mean, I am going to be playing the game, but anyway, whatever. Today I'll be going over pretty much a brief summary of Subnautica's lore or timeline, however you want to call it. Because, for me, I genuinely love playing the game. It's a game series that I adore so much. It's one of those games that I always come back to every so often because I just love playing it. First off, let's start out with the architect era, where you would learn that the architect started out with biological bodies that eventually adapted to with better technology, right? So they would learn that eventually through with time, because they are essentially a hive mind, that they could transport their consciousness into mechanical creations that they would use as bodies through a storage medium or a storage vessel, essentially. And with that, they leaped into a whole nother technological age, allowing them to travel to other worlds, other galaxies. And in one of those planets, they would also find Earth, where they would take an artifact from the 13th century humans in a way of a sword, right? Now, because they were technically mechanical beings at this time, they had the chance to leave their storage vessels, but rarely did they unless it was absolutely necessary. Eventually, through all this, they would find the Kara on one of the planets that they discovered. And with that, they sent the Kara out to other research stations throughout the galaxy, throughout the systems, whatever it would make be at the time, for further study and development, because at this time it was a massively contagious bacterium. Eventually, they would come to planet 4546b, the planet that I am currently on now, and find the Emperor Leviathan. Now, the Emperor Leviathan is known mostly for carrying the gene that would help produce an enzyme that would fight the bacterium. But instead of doing it in a right way, they would learn through force. They tried to take the knowledge by force, and eventually that failed. The bacterium got out and infected the planet. And with that, they had to essentially quarantine a lot of planets, which is why there's the gun on the 4546b planet. Because of their wrongdoings and because they failed to contain the bacteria when they did have it. So during this process, like I said, they would study the Kara and try to contain it, but again, they failed. And the only way to cure it was through the Emperor Leviathan on 4546b. So after that, we flash forward a few hundred years, and we come to the era of the Transgov War, which consisted of smaller governmental deities, I guess you could call systems, that would eventually lead to war with each other. Until one day, Altera was known to help fund them. But eventually, it would come to the point that Altera had to step in and say, hey, look, if this war don't stop, I'm no longer going to fund y'all because y'all are going to wipe each other out. And with two major transgovs going at each other, that's not a good thing. Because at the end of the day, you had the Altera Corporation, the Mongolian Empire, the Sol Trans government, and the Andromeda Transgov. Three of which were before Altera, and because of this, because Altera was such like a big trading system, government system, eventually a treaty was signed, which made Altera a new world trade or galactic trade transgov. I don't know why I can't talk. I'm having problems today. I have a whole script and it's not working out for me. Now, keep in mind, there is someone who goes into more details about this than I do. And I will do my best to leave that video down in the comments for y'all. Or not the comments, but the description. So that way you guys can listen to it. You guys can learn more than I'm going to be able to teach you right now. Because like I said, this is only a brief summary. With that, we leap into Subnautica. Subnautica is the first canonical game in the series. And it starts with the Degasi, a privately owned geological surveying / transport ship manned by 6 people. Their whole purpose of coming here after being scanned was the fact that they wanted to survey the land or the world of 4546B. And to do that, they would quickly do a slingshot maneuver, which was already planned, and use the speed and momentum to quickly scan the planet and then go about their business. But because of the quarantine gun, they got shot down, leaving only 3 members alive, which would be Marguerite, Paul, and Bart. Now, when this happened, only those 3 survived. And eventually they settled on the floating island. But because Marguerite was knowledgeable and had more experience, she knew something bad was going to happen because of the terrain. Now, something eventually did happen, and the island got flooded, which sent them into a locational search for a new place to live. And Marguerite had said, hey, there's a place under the safe shallows that looks suitable for what we need to do. So that led to them leaving the island, getting their resources, and going to the caves under the safe shallows that we know today. Eventually, though, they would start running out of resources and food, as well as other things. And Marguerite again made the choice to leave and go even farther down, which would lead them to the crab squid home area near the Lost River. Now, as the story progresses and things continue, time passes, eventually something would happen, and a crab squid would attack the small group of people, presumably killing Paul. And in the escape, Bart learned that he would have to go to these floating islands because that's the only place he knew really where to go that was safe enough. And Marguerite went the other way, and in doing so met a Reaper Leviathan that she had to fight for her life, ultimately killing the Reaper Leviathan and then going into its body, floating for days, if not weeks, until she finally went to the polar zone in Subnautica Below Zero. But Bart, on the other hand, would eventually succumb to the Kara and die on the floating island, making sure that his choice was a testament in time that no one else would make by leaving some PDA entries as well as leaving the base on top of the mountain. Then, a few years later, eventually a new ship called the Aurora would make the same mistake the Degasi would make, and got too close to the planet, where it was later shot down by the same sentry turret that would take down the Degasi not that long before. It was also there to see if there was any survivors at the time. But again, it got shot down before it can make any progress in its mission. As we all know, a couple of survivors left on life pods. All of them presumably died except for one, Riley. Riley would go out, learn as much as he could about the planet, eventually learning that he had contracted the Kara and make his life a little bit harder. Now, we all know that the Kara did infect him, but it didn't stop him. He continued on his journey, traversing the sea world of 4546B, ultimately learning as much as he can, getting the knowledge and the power to go to the Lost River. With that, he eventually found the Emperor Leviathan after many struggles and would come to her aid in hatching her babies. After doing the necessary tasks that the Emperor Leviathan asked him to do, she eventually entrusted him with the enzyme that would effectively kill the Kara. The only known vaccine to kill the Kara. With this, he released the baby Emperor Leviathans and essentially healed the planet, which would then lead to the story of Subnautica Below Zero. Now, before I start this next segment, there's also an added little bonus that during the final events of Subnautica, you can also save the sunbeam, depending on what you do before you get the signal. You could also not save the sunbeam and it get blown up by the gun before it touches down. But if you choose to save the sunbeam, it'll tell you that help is no longer needed and they can go, essentially. But now, 2 years have gone by, and we return to 4546B as Robin Io, who illegally travels to 4546B aboard an Xeno shuttle due to finding out that her sister had died mysteriously. But things don't go to plan, as they normally don't, and she crash lands on 4546B's polar site due to a meteor storm. As time would pass with Robin, she would learn of what happened to Sam with the aid of Marguerite Maida, who the two become unlikely friends after learning that Robin wasn't there for Altera, but was there to find out what happened to her sister. And because of that, she would help Robin guide her into how and what happened to Sam. Because Sam and Marguerite were pretty close. At first, they wasn't because, Marguerite just viewed her as another Altera person. But during her research on the planet, she would come across an architect who they would call Alan. With Alan's help, Robin would find a vast amount of knowledge and technology based on the architects, and eventually would even find a Leviathan who had frozen through the ice caps hundreds, if not thousands of years ago in one of the research labs that was infected with the Kara. With the guidance of Sam, you would find the vaccine using a spy pangolin in a cave to keep it safe. Because at this time, Altera was using genetic research to try and manipulate the Kara and make it stronger, faster, and more essentially used for war or something else for their funds. Something to make them money. Which is not good if you know anything about bacteriums. Once they mutate, they get stronger. Sometimes they get faster. They get deadlier. But this is what Altera wanted because they wanted to make money. Eventually, with the aid of Alan, they would put together Alan's new body. And with that, Alan sent her on a few more quests that would help aid Alan get back to his home world, which also meant the choice to go with him or to stay on 4546B in hopes that she would find rescue herself or find a way off the planet herself. Arguably, she made the better choice and went with Alan through the portal, which saved her life, and she would be one of the first people to physically see the architect home world, not to mention the architect himself. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little dicey because there's not really that much of a story that comes on with the next part. Essentially, after Subnautica Below Zero happens, we get the story of Natural Selection 2, where the Kara somehow evolved into xenomorph-like creatures or aliens. I know it's kind of funny because, Aliens, the series. But essentially, they would evolve into actual biological creatures who would go on rampages and kill a lot of people or civilians or whatever it may be. They were uncaring. They killed what they wanted and did what they wanted because they were designed that way by the Kara. It's also at this time that Altera had stepped up even more and decided to pose regulations and martial law with the aid of other transgovs because they were sending out frontiersmen that would help fight the Kara creatures that had now popped up all over the galaxy. This then leads me to Voices from Beyond, the little podcast episodes that you would find on the Subnautica actual YouTube channel. With episode 1, you learned that the Altera stocks are plummeting because they have found a new world called Zazura, and they are posing it as a new pioneer world, safe from everything, and your new next life. During this broadcast, you would also learn of what happened to Riley. Riley would leave 4546B and become an instant celebrity who was known throughout the galaxy as doing for what he did, surviving the impossible. And then he would write a book about it. And that's as far as we know about Riley. The message cuts off at this point, and nothing else is said about Riley. It's at this point that episode 2 happens, and it starts with Altera and other transgovs taking what is presumably the Mongolian Empire or transgovs states or smaller nations or people away from their homes. And at this point, the Mongolians have decided to do a mass exodus from their systems, their planets, their home. But before it ends, you start hearing something about a bacterium. A bacterium that in episode 3 of Deep Voices from the Beyond would sound more and more like the Kara. Which brings me to episode 3. We learn that the Kra is now mutating into the aliens that would then be called xenomorphs, which means this takes place around the time period of Natural Selection 2. And when I say that around the time period, I mean the Voices from the Deep, or the Beyond, I'm sorry. So about this time, the Voices of the Deep is happening, and Natural Selection 2 has begun to play a role in the Subnautica franchise. Near the end of that episode, you hear another broadcast come into play stating that the Cicada will be heading to Zazora as a new frontier ship. And they are asking people to come join them to be free from any war, famine, or anything of the sort. To be free. It is also at this time they have started martial law on the Mongolian Empire. So at this point, the Mongolians have almost been completely wiped out as a transgov. They have been annihilated, per se, in terms of finances, rights, and anything that they once was. Now, if you've listened to the stories, you would learn that at this time the virus has been an outbreak, a complete outbreak. And the people who are in the stories, the family, the father leaves in episode 3 to go to the cicada, and he asks his wife, presumably, if things get better, to please leave and come with me, which she ultimately agrees and says she promises. But in episode 4, you hear her cough. You hear that the fact that she is now possibly infected with the Kara, which means that also the kids are infected with the Kara. But with that, you hear more about the cicada a little bit, and it would say that you would learn that the cicada communications are gone. There is no more communicating with the cicada. Effectively, it's disappeared from the galaxy. No one knows what happened. And honestly, that's probably where we leave into Subnautica 2. But in episode 5 of Voices from Beyond, you would learn that the cicada was broadcasting an emergency broadcast saying that they need help as we are now entering the planet's atmosphere and we're on a collision course, essentially. Which means that the final broadcast of the cicada was an SOS. And we wouldn't know anything about it until Subnautica 2 came out. Now, Subnautica 2 has only been out for about 2 weeks at this point, so there's not much story to go from there. I know there's a lot more to this story, and I wish I had the time to talk about it. I know that there's enough story in Subnautica 2 to say, hey, we have a glimpse of what it could be. But I don't want to put it out there. One, for spoilers. Two, I would like to be able to do a complete story before I just do it. Now, with that being said, we do have a lot. We do have a lot of what we do know. And like I said before, I will do my absolute best to find every video you guys need that I've personally watched for you guys to watch more in depth if you want to, and I'll leave them down in the description below for the YouTube channel. But for now, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this gives you a little bit more insight of what it means and what has happened in Subnautica thus far. Because again, we've gotten a whole new story that is just the tip of the iceberg and the beginning of a new character and how they save a whole new world of Proteus. But that's enough of that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like down below. Hit that subscribe button. And remember, I do a lot of Subnautica based videos because Subnautica is one of my most favorite games in the world. Favorite series even. So keep an eye out because I plan on doing more. But for now, I hope you guys have a great day. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!